Hello.
こんにちは。Welcome to the Glocal Podcast
Brought to you by Kwansei Gakuin University.
東京丸の内キャンパス
Our show is about events around the world from the perspective of people on the street.
with your host, Tamago.
And Kangaku Taro. In this episode, we travel to Beirut, Lebanon to talk to Dr. Hana Al Ghali, a senior lecturer and academic researcher at the American University of Beirut, and with Nour Jeha, an elected first-year student representative at the same university. We hope you enjoy the conversation. Hello.
Good morning. Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
Hi, Nour.
Hi.
Hello. See you.
Thank you for joining us, Nour.
Thank you for having me.
So, first question, and it's to both of you, and tell us a little bit about how, let's start broadly, how the coronavirus has impacted education in Lebanon, university education in Lebanon, both from the perspective of an educator and researcher, and from the perspective of a first-year student like Nour.
Okay, I'm going to start and then I'll hand it off to Nour because I think she'll continue where I will stop. So basically, when we got news about COVID in Lebanon and the lockdown had to start, I think it was around end of Feb, early March last year. Of course, the first thing that was closed down were the schools, not the universities. The universities continued, and I do recall very well that my kids were at home, but I still went to work. We had meetings and everything. But then soon after, there was a total lockdown, and even universities had to close down. And it was, I must say, it was a bit of a chaos. Universities were not ready. Nobody was ready to teach online. Some universities had Moodle, for example, as an LMS, but beyond that, very little was done in terms of online interaction. Even email was not something that many students and professors were accustomed to. We at AUB did a survey after the first semester of online to better understand how the students, what experiences of the students of the online teaching and learning. And that was part of the survey. We added a few questions to the survey we administer at the end of every semester anyhow. And it was really interesting to see that, the students having difficulties keeping up with the lectures and whatnot. Some of them were asynchronous because synchronous was a challenge for many reasons, one of which, is the electricity cuts in the country. We have very frequent electricity cuts. We have weak internet. Not everybody has access to internet, let alone not everybody has access to devices, a tablet or a computer or whatnot. So some students had to actually go on campus, get permission to go on campus to get access to their classes online, or sometimes a professor would be teaching an online course and then suddenly he'll be gone and the students will be there. And so therefore it was very important for professors to adapt very quickly and be agile and record lectures and whatnot. But still, it was a challenge. Many professors did not respond to emails. There was an ambiguity in the grades that the students received. For example, they didn't understand why. The level of understanding was also impacted of the students. And these are all student responses that I'm sharing with you. But also some students had challenges dealing with online. Did not know how to, address a few issues. Another very important aspect was that of assessment exams. And students would tell you, because they're not used to having online exams. So sometimes time was an issue. The kind of questions they were not prepared for and whatnot was an issue and all of that. I think now moving on after that last year, 2 semesters online or in a kind of hybrid, I think the university has adjusted well. The professors have adjusted well. There have been a lot of professional development for the professors, but also the students, especially those like Nour coming from last year, they were in school, and this year they were in university. A lot of them have already had online interaction with their teachers at school. And so now moving on to this at the university, it's a little bit easier. The challenge remains in the hands-on courses like labs medical students, nurses, and other, where you need the students to actually experience. And I know that in other countries also, there have been a lot of efforts to try to see how they can do simulations for the students or virtual labs or whatnot. It's something that you should know about Lebanon. We are a small, very small country, but still we have around 50 universities in this country. And some of those universities are quite big universities. Others are smaller ones, family run. EUB tends to be one of the oldest in the region, not only in Lebanon. And so I think it's unfair for us to generalize when we speak about EUB to the rest of the sector, but these are just some of the experiences. And the last thing before I move on, I hand over to Nour, is that Lebanon is quite unique in the COVID experience because we happen to have, I don't like to call it a revolution, I like to call it an awakening, if I may. In October 2019, we had a large demonstration that lasted for months, not just days, in Lebanon, and that was due to some economic, socioeconomic issues and sociopolitical issues, and that impacted the lives of everyone. And then with COVID, the socioeconomic situation of many families and many students also was impacted. We have a family friend who had both his children, daughter and son at EUB, one at EUB, one at LAU, another university. And unfortunately, with the economic situation, his work was impacted. He was able to get a visa for his daughter to go and continue her education in Germany, but his son did not get a visa, and he unfortunately could not continue paying his tuition fees. So his son is no longer going to university. So this is an example that also the impact of COVID, there was an indirect impact on the socioeconomic situation of the families. And now, with the also the devaluation of the local currency, the universities have been forced to, but change the exchange rate at which the students pay the tuition fees. And this has also triggered a lot of unrest in universities. With that, I'll hand over to Nour.
Thank you, Dr. Hana. I would like to add to what Dr. Hana said. From the perspective of a first-year student, we can tell that our professors in Lebanon are trying their best to be able to provide for us the best education we are paying for. But at the same time, just the way we are dealing with the economic situation and we're dealing with everything happening in our country, the professors are dealing with the same issues, and just as much as everything is reflecting on us and is like we're coming to terms with it and is affecting our performance, of course it's gonna affect the performance of some professors and some doctors. Like most of them are working really, really hard and be able to provide for us like the best education that we're trying to have. And because of the dollar situation in Lebanon, Lebanese youth are usually known to be able to travel and study abroad, but due to the economic situation that's been happening, and due to the devaluation of our local currency, it's really hard for students to go study abroad. And by that, everyone's studying inside our country. But we are very thankful because we have some of the best universities in all of the Middle East, but they're not in a study environment, specifically at home. So this adds a lot of pressure on the student, and it affects his grades, his performance, his interaction. It affects everything. But like Dr. Hana said, the awakening of students right now, especially during the situation, is very important. And we could have seen it in Lebanon. It's very common to have university elections where student representatives are chosen in order to be able to represent the students in front of the university board. And before, it used to always be like political parties that used to dominate, but now it's the independents that are dominating, and we can see a huge shift in performance. So I personally am a first-year student at AUB, American University of Beirut. So I haven't experienced the previous experiences, but I've heard so many stories about us students being awakened and being ready to lead. because we know that us students, we're here to learn. We're here to learn for betterment of ourselves, for the betterment of our country, for the betterment of our generation as a whole. So we're working really hard, and we are making very big changes. And one more thing I would like to add, as also as a first-year student, the last thing I'd like to add is that students nowadays are also working really cooperatively as one unit from all universities around all Beirut, and we're helping each other go through these hard times. And we have some of the best regional universities, and this is why we have many international students that study in our universities. And by that, they are seeing what we are going through, and they are also being awakened by noticing all of what we're doing, and they're really appreciating it. So now, not only we have the support of each other, and we're all trying to push through these hard times, but we also have the support of our international friends.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. So let me just wrap up a little bit. The context in Lebanon is a bit special, because as you've both alluded to, even before the advent of Corona, you had a lot of political instability in Lebanon with the, let's say, awakening or uprising or revolution or protest. People give it different names, that began as a reaction to years of political corruption, public incompetence, a whole list of things that we can describe here. Then, or around the same time, you had economic collapse, represented by the currency collapse as well, the Lebanese currency collapse. And then you had the unfortunate, horrible Beirut blast. And all of that is within the context now of an added layer of the coronavirus. So there's a lot to unpack. Let's try to bring it down to more specific story.
Yeah.
Give us an example of like the type of research that you're unable to conduct right now. Like one example of a research project that you think is super important that now you're facing a setback because of these conditions.
Sure. So there's this one project that we received funding for about a year ago, and it focuses on understanding the environment or the context in which the students are in, the vulnerable students, Lebanese and Syrian refugees, in public schools and NGOs, to understand what context impacts their well-being. And so we decided to look at two important environments. One is the school environment, and the second one is the home environment. And so we had a set of 6 surveys, and we wanted to compare, for one thing, we wanted to compare, the environment. The second thing, we wanted to compare the NGOs versus the public schools. And these are all vulnerable kids. And we, first of all, it took us a long time to get approval from the ministry to enter the public schools. So that also delayed our project. And then by the time we got the approval, we were only able to do a pilot, and with grade 7. And then, COVID hit and everything closed. And so by the time this public schools and the whole society was able to realize what COVID is and how to deal with it and whatnot, nobody wanted to give us nobody wanted to had time to even pay attention to a survey or a research study or whatnot. And so now that everybody got a new normal, we were able to contact the schools again. But then again, we face this challenge of, okay, we want to go to school, we're not allowed to go to school. We want to administer these surveys, we have the online challenge. So what we are doing to address this is, for one, we're going to drop grade 4. So there's a possibility that we may even drop grade 7 and go higher in the grade levels. And there are, of course, research-related reasons why we chose grades 4 and grade 7, which I'm not going to go in right now. But basically, these are some of the challenges. We are very lucky that our donor or the person who's supporting this research has been very understanding.
I should add that another difficulty or challenge that Lebanon is facing is that it has one of the highest, if not the highest, refugee populations relative, on a per capita basis. I think it's number 1 or definitely in the top 3 in the world.
For sure. And even these kids have been, there was a challenge in bringing them to school. I mean, we had, before the COVID, we had about 500,000 school-age children in Lebanon who are refugees, Syrian refugees specifically. And only 25% of those were actually in school. The rest were some in NGOs, most are not even in any form of education. So there was a challenge before. So now you can imagine that the access to school has become even more and more difficult. So after your other questions, I think you were talking about international students, and I think that's a very good point that Nour brought up. So yes, as Nour mentioned, AUB does have, it used to have much larger international student population. It was impacted by the war, and then after the war, we saw a slight increase in that, but still that type of population changed, because before in the 90s, we had more of a, international student population from the Gulf countries. Then when the Gulf started to flourish, and you had universities open in the Gulf already, and branches from U.S. universities, UK universities, and whatnot, we saw a drop in that type of international students. However, we still have international students, particularly those who are on scholarships, like MasterCard Foundation scholarship that brings students from Africa and whatnot. But still, it's not a very large one. We also have another fund from the U.S. government that supports Afghani students. We have other funds from the U.S. that support students from around the Middle East region, the MEPI scholars. But in any case, it's small. And now with the COVID that hit, these students have the option to go home and study online. Just like Lebanese students who are registering in universities abroad also have that option to stay home and study online. The challenge with Lebanese students going to universities abroad is that families can no longer transfer funds to their kids to study abroad. They have, I might have hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank, but I'm only allowed to transfer, if I'm lucky, maybe $500 to my son or daughter abroad to pay the tuition and whatnot. Yes.
And that's because of the capital controls, which were
Yes.
recently implemented a few months ago after the currency collapse, correct?
Yes, exactly. That is all because of the socio-political situation, socioeconomic situation. So the Lebanese, so you were asking whether the number of students would actually increase or decrease at the universities. And it is really a dilemma. The universities are in this, kind of economic situation and economic collapse in the country, right? The first thing they were going to do is cut on salaries, and that means cut on staff and faculty. And they did that. We saw that particularly at AUB, and that is because universities want to sustain themselves. So it is very understandable. It is painful, but it's understandable. There is one concern in this, the impact on the quality of education. So the teachers, who leave, the faculty who leave, what's going to happen to the teaching and all of that. The other aspect is that many students you may think that many students will not be able to enroll in universities anymore because of the economic situation. This is also true, but the margin of this is not, is not really clear yet, particularly because the universities just changed the exchange rate. So, and still it is at a reasonable, it is still at least half what is the market rate of the US dollar. So many families who can afford to send their kids abroad are not able to send them abroad because of the transfer problem. So this is why I was saying that what you may think that students may not enroll in local universities may be the opposite, because if I cannot send my son abroad or daughter, then I'm going to have to register in a local university, and that may flip the situation that may be expected.
Now, if we want to shift a bit and to go to your question, to when you asked me about families, about Lebanese families in Lebanon, how it's affecting the students. First of all, because let's start with the obvious. Because of the Beirut explosion, many students have lost their home. They have lost the safe place they used to be able to study in, to be able to focus in. Even if some of them were able to find alternative homes or something that's very temporary, they wouldn't feel as comfortable sitting and focusing. Second thing, this is in some cases. I'm not saying this is in all cases, but I'm giving examples of how students can be finding it really difficult to study at home. Some Lebanese households don't have many electronic devices, and if you have 2 or more children that have classes at the same time, it's going to be harder to be able to provide a lot for all of them, to have the proper material to be able to focus fully, especially if the course is more developed and requires more applications on the phone or on the laptop or anything of a sort. Also, you have family pressure when you are at home, especially during the COVID times. When you are at home, it's really hard. It would be really hard to focus, realizing that your family is going through a hard time. When you notice that your parents are going through a hard time paying bills or being really stressed about the health insurance. Like when you are sitting on a table and focusing and studying, and you have your parents talking about everything pressuring like behind you, you're not going to be able to focus. And as we said, the unemployment rate in Lebanon has increased drastically, and many people now are not being paid well, especially with the conversion of our local currency and the dollar. And our tuitions have increased by 3.6 times, and this is due to the devaluation of our local currency. But still, many people won't be able to pay tuitions, and by many students not being able to pay tuitions, they will need to revert to public institutions. And public institutions, as we said, are underfunded and cannot hold this many students specifically. And this is such a sad case, specifically for the students who have 1 semester or 2 semesters to be able to graduate, or the ones who had a plan, for example, to
Nour?
The internet.
So you can experience what Nour is talking about exactly. The connectivity, and unfortunately. But just to, as we wait for Nour, I think we've been talking a lot about university students, but it is important to note that the public university in Lebanon enrolls, almost a little bit less than half of the university students in the country. And they have been impacted greatly because of the capacity or the capabilities, not the capacity, the capabilities that the public university has, to administer online classes, to administer exams online and whatnot. The capacity is there in terms of enrolling more students. It's just that unfortunately, in Lebanon, the trust has always been in private education, whether it's in general education or higher education. And so this is why, some students, when you may think that some students will just go and enroll in the public university and we only have one, it's probably not the case. Something you also should know about Lebanese people is that they invest in the education of their kids. Over 70% of children in Lebanon are enrolled in private schools in Lebanon. So that shows you that the parents are paying out of pocket to enroll their kids in private education because they believe that education, the return to this investment is going to be a positive one. There's a phrase that the World Bank uses to describe the situation of education in Lebanon, and that is the learning crisis. So we do have a learning crisis. This is in general education, but given that I work a lot in higher ed, I also believe we have a learning crisis in higher education. And that is, we've been talking about, educating students online, but what about after they graduate? There are a lot of skills that they may not have had a chance to grasp, and then that are in demand in the labor market. So those students like Nour, or those who have finished 2 years online now by the end of this year and are going to the labor market, how employable are they going to be? What kind of skills are they going to have, and what kind of skills are they going to be missing? Now, I might be wrong, because you may say, oh, well, the labor market has also changed and the types of skills that are in demand have also changed as well. So, but we should wait and see. Nour is back.
Hi, Nour.
Nour, can you hear us?
This was a perfect demonstration to how the electricity in Lebanon cuts off for students during their sessions.
Perfect. Thank you for demonstrating. Nour, do you want to just go back to what you were saying before you got cut off with the electricity cut?
Yes. So what I was saying is that the last thing I was saying was about the public sector being underfunded, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the public sector being underfunded, as we said, it gives this is why usually Lebanese families push to save a lot of money to be able to pay for institutions, private institutions in Lebanon. And one of the main reasons to why many students prefer to go and travel abroad to continue their education is that abroad they provide more scholarships than they do here in a certain way, and sometimes private universities can be less expensive for Lebanese students abroad than it is in Lebanon. And this is why many students do decide to go abroad. But at the same time, for the students who choose to stay in Lebanon right now, as we said, the economic situation is getting worse. Many people are needing to go into the public sector institutions, which is not being properly funded, which cannot hold the amount of students that might transfer from private institutions to public sectors. So now the public sector is holding two extra weight loads on it, the education public sector. First of all, the students that cannot pay for private institutions in Lebanon and usually reverted to going abroad and paying a smaller amount for private institutions abroad, which they cannot do that anymore because as Lebanese people, we cannot transfer big amounts of dollars outside of our country because of the capital control. Second of all, the students that could not go abroad because of the capital control, but could afford private institutions in Lebanon, but now because of the change of the currency rate, cannot anymore. So we have two extra pressures on our public institutions. And as we know, we're going through an economic crisis. We're going through a social crisis because of the revolution in Lebanon. So everything is really stressful because we're adding more pressure on the government while demanding for the government to leave because it's not doing its job. And one more thing from a Lebanese perspective, from a Lebanese student, especially from a first-year student, is that Lebanon is a very small country. So going from one place to another is generally easy. If we don't want to mention the traffics because we have terrible infrastructure, but this facilitated us as students to unite ourselves and to work all together because people from all different parts of Lebanon, we were still being able to contact each other. We'd still be able to form protests together. We had a student protest on Saturday against the dollarization rate because many people couldn't afford it anymore. And many students from many different universities all across Lebanon joined, and it was truly astonishing to see how many people were ready to stand for each other because people who couldn't pay were both on the streets and both protesting for their educational right, because education is a right. It's a basic human right.
And how is the government reacting?
The government, basically, the protests are against the government because the government is what led us to our economic crash. But at the same time, we are protesting also against, not against, I don't want to say against, we respect our institutions very much, but we were protesting to make our voices heard in our institutions and in our universities, because even though we know that all of us are going through a really hard time, the situation that we're in shouldn't be fully thrown on the student, because as students, we are the future of Lebanon, and we are the ones in a way that are gonna benefit Lebanon for the future, hopefully help it develop more. And if they don't invest in us now, what are they going to invest in to make the country a better country? So we wanted to make our voices heard, because not only are tuitions increasing in a crazy manner, but also our parents are being paid much less and are being unemployed, which is a double sword for a student.
Okay, Doctor?
Just a quick comment here, because you're asking, so how is the government reacting to this? I must say, and I have no position, by the way, just, so you don't judge what I'm going to say. The Minister of Education and Higher Education did announce last week and did issue a decision that all university fees should be paid at the rate of 1,500, which is what was before the economic situation. And also, we do have a law in Lebanon that was issued in 2014 to regulate private higher education in the country, which stipulates that all universities should submit their budgets to the ministry to be reviewed and approved. Not approved, I must say, just reviewed. So now I don't think that this will make any difference if you submit your budget, but you don't submit the end of year account, right, to see how much you spend and whatnot. So that's not required. But still, I must say that the ministry is trying to do something. But given that Lebanon gives a lot of autonomy to private universities by law, this is according to the law, they are highly autonomous. There is very little to what the government can do.
So the one more thing that I really understand the most concern is the financial situation in Lebanon, but I won't say second issue, but other than the economical situation, but also what's the most concerning about the student?
First of all, it's definitely the economic situation, as you've said, that has taken most of our time in Lebanon. But another trouble that students are facing, as you have seen during our call, is the internet issues and the electricity issues. In Lebanon, it's very common for the electricity to go out several times per day, sometimes announced, sometimes unannounced, sometimes during exams. So it's really hard for students to be able to always be 100% ready for anything, because many things might come their way, especially that the data in Lebanon, like those are the small details, but the small details are what makes a difference. The data in Lebanon, 3G or 4G or 5G, it's really expensive. Like everything communications in Lebanon is really expensive, and sometimes students might have to revert, instead of using their Wi-Fi because the electricity might cut, they might have to revert to their data plan, and their data plan finishes quickly because we don't charge a lot. Like we don't refill it a lot because it's really expensive. For some students, they cannot afford it. So this might be one of the hard things to tackle also in Lebanon.
I see that Nour discuss a lot about this situation with your, friends or the students. So how do you communicate, or how do you discuss with the other students or friends? Because you have lots of the information about this situation. I was impressed.
Thank you. I would like to say that personally, I am a student representative. So I was elected by my fellow peers to represent them in front of my university's administration. As a student representative, I speak to several people, and several people would come to me with several of their problems, and I would try to contact the administration for them. And this is why I have a broad knowledge about what many students might be going through, even though I'm not going through them personally. But as we said, as students, we're trying to support each other as much as we can, because mental health is something that is very essential, especially for students, and especially right now. And sometimes the best way to feel better is just to talk about it to someone who might understand, or might be able to try to help you as much as they can. But also, since I'm in the student representatives of my university at AUB, we are also in contact with the student representatives of different universities in Lebanon. So as an independent group, we have also done a convention to speak about our demands concerning the universities and what we want. Because the main thing that we want from universities is transparency to where the money is going and how the money is being divided through and how it's being used, because we are paying, it's our right to know, and we're paying now even more, and we want to see, because our institutions, they are increasing the tuition, but at the same time they're increasing the financial aid. So they are helping some students, but at the same time some students have not applied to financial aid prior, and now would need to apply to it. So this is why it's also forming a huge a huge weight on a student's mental health and on a student's mind. So while studying for the exams, at the same time, you need to be remembering that and planning ahead for what's coming next, especially in this semester. And I would also just like to note one more thing, that us as students also in Lebanon, we tend to be a very close community. Us Lebanese people are a close community. Like it's very easy to be able to communicate with each other, especially because we're such a small country. So this is why it's easy for us to be able to share our opinions, especially through social media. Social media is playing a huge role in our movement as students and in our work as students, because we can be through social media pages, announcements, groups. We also have Zoom meetings. It's like the internet is helping us a bit, thankfully, with the COVID situation.
Thank you. You're really motivated. Yeah.
Thank you. As a student, with my personal experience, I have been accepted to the universities of my choice abroad, in the US and in Europe and in Canada. But due to the dollarization, my parents were able to afford it, but now we cannot transfer the dollars abroad. Also, in addition, my dad is now unemployed because of the institution he used to work in. Now has fired many people. So I'm trying to be there for people, and I'm thankful that many people have been there for me. And this is a very hard time we're all trying to go through, but hopefully we'll make it.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I think it's important to know that we are facing similar challenges to everybody around the world in terms of online learning and whatnot, in terms of the quality of education, how much we were able to reach students and all of that. But it's also important to know that we have additional challenges in addition to the COVID, which are the economic and political challenges that we face. And these just place additional burdens on the education sector in Lebanon. And so, we have very good examples and very good practices in the country, but at the same time, we have, another extreme. So we have a variety. And this gap, I think, between students is going to create further inequities down the road, particularly, in terms of employment, level of education and whatnot. I think it is important to know that the highest school dropouts are among the boys in the lowest quintiles, the socioeconomic quintiles. And so with COVID now, these kids have already been dropping out of school before they reach the age of 18. And so now with COVID, the challenges of the economic situation, I think parents are going to have to make very difficult choices in terms of whether I send my child to school. And when I say school, I mean secondary school, because this is the step right before going to university. And this is how it's connected to university education. Or I send him or her to work and help me with, paying the rent, buying food and whatnot. The uncertainties in how the socioeconomic and sociopolitical situation is going to unfold in the coming months just makes it difficult to predict or even plan, for the future of education in the country. Given that all, I think we still should continue to, support as much as possible. The university is trying to support schools and in terms of teaching and learning and all of that, and have hope. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nour.
Also, I would really like to thank you for this opportunity to be able to connect with students across the world, to be able to tell them about our situation, and hopefully being able to listen to their situation and being able to relate to each other. Because it's really important. The most important thing in the world, which we tend to forget, is humanity. And we learn to be able to help humanity. So I think this is an amazing initiative. Thank you. And as we said, in Lebanon, students have a lot of capabilities and a lot of passion towards what they're doing. And by many people fighting for their education and fighting for their rights and trying as much as they can to make the best of what they have. This has proven to us that we are taking it very seriously and we are looking for development. For any student who hasn't been in Lebanon, I know we might have spoken a lot about the bad parts that we might have been facing, but I do promise you that Lebanon is a very welcoming country, and it's an amazing country to be able to visit whenever you would be able to, or for example have a transfer semester or anything of the sort. It would be an experience I would promise you wouldn't regret at all. And okay, this is off topic a bit, but I would like to mention that we have the number one nightlife almost in the world, so you'll enjoy it. So I do support anyone who's willing to come to Lebanon, because it's not as bad as it's portrayed in the media at all. We are actually a really good community, and even though we're facing really hardships, we are trying to fight through it, and we're trying to make the best out of the situation we have. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So you both said that we're such a small country, but I know you're super friendly and kind to the neighbors. I mean that you guys accept the many refugees, and I'm very, so you guys have the big heart, even a small country, but you guys have a big heart. So thank you so much. I'm so happy to having you guys broadcast.
Thank this is a conversation to start a new podcast, whether we have this big heart for refugees or what it is. But we won't go there now.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was really a pleasure to meet you. Thank you.
Next, we are joined by Ms. Micaela Orfali, a university student in Buenos Aires, Argentina, studying multimedia technology. Enjoy the show.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good. So your name is Micaela Orfali.
Yeah, my name is Micaela Orfali.
Tell me a little bit about yourself and like what you're studying.
So I go to a private university. I'm 20 years old. I study multimedia technology, which is a career who has programming, also design, arts, and business.
Wow. And you're in Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Yeah. Well, I really like going to university, something that I really love. I really love my career, actually. I think coronavirus impacted like so much like the dynamic of the class, most of all in the design class, because on design class we work, we show what we did during the week, and then we give feedback to each other. So the feedback is really hard online because no one turns on the camera. You can see what the person who is talking, what is he thinking, or maybe if he's excited or what he's presenting. So it's really hard, and like you don't know if the person who is on the other side is like sleeping or not, or if they are liking what you're explaining. So that one got really hard, like that subject specifically.
Why don't they turn on the cameras?
The university sometimes asks to turn them on, but the policy is that you can't force someone to turn on the camera because you don't know what is going on in their houses. So they ask to turn on your camera, but if you don't, they won't force you to do that.
You see, so it's a privacy issue.
Yeah.
So you're not going to university, they stopped the university classes.
Yeah, but luckily my university and my career organized really fast. Like we only lost 1 day of class, but I'm like super lucky. Like my friends that go to the University of Buenos Aires, that is a public university, like it's like the biggest university in the country. Everything closed in March, and they started university on June. But like that is like the most common case here.
So the other university lost 3 months.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay. What kind of student life do you have? I mean, do you see maybe your friends if they are living nearby, your other students that go to your university? Do you meet with them at least outside of the campus?
No, so here we don't it's not normal to live in the university you go to. So you maybe move to Buenos Aires to live somewhere nearby your school, but there are no campus like you see in the USA. So you never live, or nobody lives in the university. That I didn't see like my high school mates and my university mates during this pandemic, like just calls or meetings, virtual ones.
Are you on lockdown or?
Not now. Like we were in lockdown from, I don't know, March to July, but no. So people like really like were locked inside for a long time.
So did this pandemic affect your career in the future?
Like no universities are open. Just like they're coming back, like primary school and some high schools, they go like once a week now or something like that. But the year here is finishing because you go to school from March to December. So it's really different for us. Like I just went 1 week to university, like go, and then everything closed. So it was like, what's going on here? It's super different.
Because you're second year and then you have a major, but you cannot go to the school, and then so maybe also not, but you can take the lecture through the online, but the student need to do the experiment. So, but you cannot do the experiment.
You say that if affect like the level of the year, like the level of education, you say?
Level of education, yeah.
Level of education.
Okay. The thing is, my career is really small. Like I go to a big university, but my career is really small. Like we are like 100 students in the 4 years of the career. So in my class, we are like between 4 or 5 people, which is crazy. It's not common at all. Don't think that. It's not common at all. Like in the University of Buenos Aires, you have classes that have 2,000 people, and it's totally normal. Like my university is insane. But so I think that the classes turn really personalized. And if you participate in class and you ask and you are there literally, like there in the class, you will like understand everything, and you can get the class to be just for you if you want it.
Yeah.
So the teachers really had to change like what they do every year, but of course they change it every year because my career is really dynamic. But like this year they had to change like maybe the, I don't know, the homework that they give all the time and stuff. But they really adapted.
Wow. So this is relatively a good story compared to other ones.
Okay, I'm glad.
Not a disaster. And in terms of after university, what do you plan to do after university? And do you think this pandemic has changed your plans in any way, future plans?
No, I don't think my plans changed at all. Like my plan was always to like get a degree and go to live abroad. I don't know where, but I want to go to live somewhere else. I don't know, maybe like New Zealand or Australia or maybe somewhere in Europe, but I'm not sure. I'm sure that like maybe this pandemic confirmed that this country doesn't work.
Keep in mind what's happening in other countries, because I think you might be doing better than a lot of other countries.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So how do you communicate with your friends? Mostly internet, I mean, like Zoom or something like that?
Yeah, we video call a lot. Like I always spend a lot of time on Discord. I don't know if you know what Discord is. Okay, so my friends, they are always like doing streams, and they are on Twitch and they play games, and I just join them. I don't play video games, but I just like to hang there a little while and like have company while I'm doing while I'm doing homework. But then with the rest of my friends, it's like Zoom calls and WhatsApp calls and stuff. But nowadays, like this, like from since last month, everything is like going back to normal, even though the cases are high. They are opening everything, and they don't mind because they have to activate tourism for this season. So I'm seeing my friends more often.
But do you have tourists coming to Argentina?
Yeah.
Wow.
From where?
Mostly Brazil, Chile. Uruguay is closed for us. Like no one can go to Uruguay, but but mostly like for people to travel inside Argentina. Tourism.
Not the big cities. They are going into smaller.
No, like everything is open. Like, you can go whatever you want to.
Oh.
Sorry, I think you meant domestic tourism. Okay, so this is really nice. Thank you. Very, very direct and simple. Anything that you want our listeners in Japan to know about Argentina? And this is like a very open question.
I don't know. Like, I think at least my experience is really different from most of the students in Argentina. Like, I don't want you to think that. So I think my experience as a student in Argentina is not the same as everyone else's because I go to a private school. So the thing I want you to know is like maybe everything is not so organized at a public university, but like just a third of the students in Argentina go to a private school. Like most of students go to national public school, and that is what is normal here. My experience is not like what you will say like Argentina is going through right now.
Do you
Like I really think my university took care of this situation really fast and in a really effective way.
do you feel fear about this pandemic?
I think that the government really tried us to have fear, like for the first few months, but actual fear. Like my grandma doesn't meet her friends and is not meeting her friends up till now. She's not seeing them. So that is really hard. But at the same time, like I try to see her like every Saturday. To my grandparents, I try to go to their houses. But my grandma got super scared. Like I'm saying, she and her friends, they talk like every day, 3 times per day. So they're in touch. But she's like she doesn't want to go anywhere for the holidays and stuff. But yet she knows I meet my friends and stuff, and like she has no problem with that because the thing is like she really wants to see us, but at the same time she's like super scared to see her friends, and it's like what is the limit here? I think the pandemic got into a point where it's like a religion where you follow what you want to do and what you don't want to do you don't. I'm not afraid about the pandemic. Like I know I'm a healthy person, but the thing that I'm really scared of is like getting the coronavirus to my grandparents.
Well, I hope everyone remains safe, and all the best to you.
Okay, thank you. All the best to you too.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
No, thank you.
Yeah. So please consider coming to Japan also.
Okay, no, here is mandatory to wear masks all the time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have restaurants and everything is open. So when you are sit with your friends somewhere outside, you don't have to use them. So it's like, where's the point? Because I'm talking to a waitress without my mask on. What's going on here?
Yeah.
And everything is like the weather is so hot now, and it's really messy.
Yeah, it's winter here, so it's kind of nice sometimes to have the mask.
But here during the winter, we couldn't go out, so that feeling never appeared.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of The Glocal with your host, Tamago
And Kangaku Taro. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Special thanks for Mr. Natsuki Ueda for sound editing.